5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Jerry, you good? All right. First, I want to welcome all of y'all. We're in room 409 here. We'll be live streaming this next year all of our meetings here. It's the second room that we'll be live streaming. We're real excited to have the individuals and the press be able to look at their legislature in action. I think it's very, very important. So we're excited about that and looking forward to having y'all watch the proceedings, not only downstairs, of course, in the legislative chamber and the Senate chamber, but also as we go through the day-to-day work of having conference reports, conference meetings, amendments to the legislation as it comes out. You'll be able to tell all of that as you go through. And another positive here, we're going to archive that. So those of you who are working, and we'll see this later on, those of you who are working will be able to archive that night. And if you have an issue or a question about public health or transportation or other issues that are on our agenda, and our agenda is published every day at least 24 hours in advance. So you'll be able to archive it up and see what your senator said that day and why they did what they did and who voted for whatever they voted for. So I want to go back for just a second on what we did last year, of which I think all of us need to be very proud. We addressed so many issues for Mississippians. For example, every child in Mississippi now has an iPad or Chromebooks. 400,000 of them came from the CARES Act money. I thought that was critical for us. We helped small businesses. $300 million went out for small businesses. We looked at tourism and allowed people to be able to know that Mississippi is, yes, we're back open for business. We want you to come here within the pandemic restraints that are given to us. We actually had the foresight, I think, to push for additional $10 million for ICU beds in Mississippi. And I was in Gulfport just a couple of weeks ago watching their ICU beds be built out. Now they're fully utilized, of course. We built out 32 new ICU beds that are now full, and we added almost 400 negative pressure rooms for hospitals all over Mississippi. That's been exceptionally critical in this time as we've faced a second wave of the pandemic. So we did a lot of work, I thought, that was well thought out. MEMA and PPE work, counties and cities got money, the universities and junior colleges and community colleges got funds. And we really spread our money, our $1.2 billion, across a plethora of needs that Mississippians had during the pandemic. And the pandemic is, of course, not over. And so we will be facing these issues for the next several months as we go through the process of making sure the vaccine is available to everyone and it's being given out today. So we're very hopeful about that. And we're looking forward to next year. And so I want to go for a minute about where I see us going next year, and we'll go through the process. First, I think you'll see a teacher pay raise coming from the Senate again this year. It got COVID last year with a pandemic, and we had to make a 5% cut in our budget. And I don't think any of us, particularly after what we saw teachers and administrators do this past year, they basically built from just broad cloth and very little navigation a distance learning process, which we funded. And it's been amazing. I sit in these Zoom calls all over, from Oxford to Pascagoula, wherever. I've listened to those students, listened to those teachers, watching them teaching. There are two things that I know about that. One is there was no other alternative to this based on the pandemic, and our teachers performed above any expectation. The second is there is no substitute for having a child in the classroom. That's where we're going. We need to have our children back in our classrooms. Repeatedly, as I ask children, were you happy with what you're doing? Well, it's okay, but we really want to get back. And there are educational components to that, social components to that. We need to have our kids back in our classrooms, and as soon as possible after the vaccination is completed, we need to do that. Again, we expended a good bit of our money, $75 million, on a match with co-ops to expand broadband in Mississippi to some 40 to 50,000 homes. You will see us again address that this year, allowing for dark fiber that may be unutilized by some of our public utilities to be utilized to further expand out to unserved areas in Mississippi to give them access to broadband coverage. It'll also be supplemented by $490 million that was allocated by the federal government through Senator Booker's bill for expansion of broadband out to unserved and underserved areas. I think you will see us explode out further. This will have an effect that we started last year with a $150 million investment. It will be picked up again this year with further investment and picked up with federal investment beginning at the end of this year and next year. All of that is to give our students access to intellectual capacities that they may not have. In areas of Mississippi, they may not have had those before. The second is people will build and live there, and businesses will prosper where they have access to the internet. There's not much question about that, and we need good access to the internet. You'll see us pushing forward on that part. Another part you'll see, for the first time really in a long time, we are going to reorganize our business incentives in Mississippi. Now, I had been working on that for a number of years. So had the Mississippi Economic Council. So had so many of our economic developers all over the state have been working on this program, and we will be pushing it out this next week. It's going to be called MFLEX, and MFLEX is a process by which we have simplified greatly the calculation of benefits for individual companies coming or expanding their businesses in Mississippi. We're also doing away with some of the tax benefits or tax credits that were given out that were costly to the state or basically never used. So we simplified the whole incentive program to start with. And as we've gone forward with this, the MFLEX part of it will be an either or. You can still use some of the tax benefits that we'll have, jobs tax credits and whatnot, if that would be more beneficial to your company. Or you can use the MFLEX program. So the MFLEX program will give you 2% credit for your building and construction. It'll give you 7% for your non-machinery type equipment. It'll provide a benefit based on 15% of full-time jobs that you start in a location. And if you're paying more than 110% of the average wage base, you get a 30% credit. Similar for individuals that have companies with startups of 25 employees or $1 million. They too will be available for these advanced credits to bring you here. That's because I think that we need to target small and medium businesses in Mississippi. That's our wheelhouse. That's where we increase the labor participation rate by having more people working instead of maybe having one giant company that comes in and basically plagiarizes the workforce for small companies. That doesn't make much sense to me. What we want to do is increase the workforce, not move it around. Certainly those that come in and offer more jobs and better paying jobs, we want to utilize those. But by the same token, we have to raise the entire labor pool up to accept all of the expansion that we want to have here in Mississippi. You'll see us push for a new branding of Mississippi, and that's underway already. That branding will take advantage of the fact that we have new business incentives that are competitive or more competitive with other states in the South, as well as we have a new flag that you adopted this last year. Plus, we have new proposals from Mississippi legislature to increase these incentives. So we need to rebrand Mississippi on a positive manner and utilize this work that we've done and that you passed, the bills that you passed, to bring more workforce to Mississippi. And we intend to do that, particularly emphasizing small to medium businesses. So you'll see us doing that. In addition, we need to right-size a lot of parts of government. Now, I have a list, and I am checking it twice. This year, we would like to address the tourism part of Mississippi. It's currently involved in MDA. It's the fourth largest generator of revenue in Mississippi, and it needs to have its own agency. As you know, we did away with 2 agencies last year, and we shrunk a third one. I'll speak to that in just a moment. But we need to start having an emphasis and a core competency on the things that make money for Mississippians, like tourism does, and agriculture does, and manufacturing does. And those particular ones need to make sure that they have the bright light shown on them, that they have the economic incentives coming from the state government to continue to perform at a high level. So that leads us to one of the agencies that we shrunk last year. That was the SWIB board. It had like 43 different people in it. Management was a great idea and a federal requirement to have certain ones, and we shrunk that to 7 members, of which I appointed 2. They are going to hire a workforce czar to make sure that our technical components are well served, that we're not duplicating services, or we're not providing technical services or creating technical expertise where someone can't get a job. So you'll see us continue to work on our workforce development and our technical workforce development. I was discussing this with them just a couple of days ago, and it appears that about 45% of Mississippians have some advanced degree, not necessarily a collegiate degree. Only about 25% of you get a collegiate degree, but some advanced training, either in a technical nature or community college nature, or an associate's degree. Those are critical to us raising the income level for Mississippians to be able to compete. And they're also critical for us to attract industry here. If we have the workforce educated, it will come. So we're very much looking forward to that, and you'll see us addressing some of the government reorganizations. We want to look at state parks this year. You can look on TV and you'll see Alabama advertising their state parks. Our state parks are in disrepair. By any consideration, the peer report or other reports have said they're in disrepair. They need to be something that we can be proud of, and that first of all, you as Mississippians want to go there. We want the normal hookups for RVs to come. We want the place to look good. We want to pay, when you go, to pay a reasonable amount of money to go there. I think it's like $4 for a car right now. It's very inexpensive. So we want all of these to be available where Mississippians can use them, and then, of course, bring in tourism dollars, which spreads across the whole economic plethora. So you'll see us looking at state parks this year, and there'll be bills out to make sure that we're in a position to be competitive with our surrounding states and more competitive. We've looked at everything from the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, which I visited unannounced myself in February, and is not functioning up to the level of standards that you would expect or I would expect. I assume there have been public hearings on that, a number of public hearings on the Senate side this year. You can look at all of those that are webcast. But in there, I assume that there will be a bill concerning the Alcohol and Beverage Commission. We continue to work on health care. We have a Medicaid bill this year, and I want to particularly thank Senator Blackburn and Representative Hood. I've been in meetings with them. They've had public meetings, 2 to 3 of the public meetings. I've been in private meetings with them in managed care as they have gone through the process of reorganizing our Medicaid. And that is a precept to us delivering better health care services in Mississippi. So we are going through that process now. Very proud of the work and the due diligence of both the House and the Senate members on the Medicaid bill this year. Once that comes out, you will see some other things that will assist in health care. For example, we want to provide the federally qualified healthcare units. Those are the FQHCs that are located throughout Mississippi. We would like for them to have the funds necessary to hire OBGYNs and deliver services for moms that may be pregnant, particularly at an earlier age, and then also for after baby care. That's very important that we have healthy citizens on the front end and healthy babies on the back end to make sure that they have all the opportunities that you had. Now, to do that, we need to have healthy moms and then healthy babies on a continuing basis. And the way to do that, I believe, is to look at these FQHCs for delivery of those people who may not have access today. So you'll see some grants, that legislation that we passed last year and we're not able to fund because of COVID, but we will be looking at funding this year. We have a corrections reform bill, and last year it was vetoed by the governor, and I want to again thank Senator Barnett and Senator Wiggins and Senator Sparks, particularly from Oxford, who's done a great job in going back, meeting with our district attorneys, meeting with the corrections officials, with the parole board, with Burrow, who runs the individual commissioner of corrections now. All of them, I believe, have reached a mutual agreement in a new bill that was put on my desk last evening. I'll be reviewing that, but I'm convinced now that we have a bill that will meet all the muster that we need to, that governs the sentencing aspects of this, and more importantly, almost to me, it governs the access when people get out of their corrections department. They have to be trained. They have to have an expertise. Last year, we gave them a driver's license for 6 months so they could go get a job. We don't want to release them and have them back. Recidivism is a very bad thing. So if you've got a way to make a living and proceed and a driver's license to get there, we think our recidivism will go down. we think our employment pool will go up. So we're working with our corrections department to do that. I will tell you that in my meetings with Mr. Kane, it is obvious to me that we are undercompensating our correction officers. That unfortunately has been habitual in several Mississippi aspects, not only there, but our conservation officers and others that are leaving jobs open because we're not competitive compensation-wise. I think it's time for Mississippians to look at what we're going to do on compensation for people who are working, keeping people in prison or doing other work for the state, that they at least have a meaningful job that's not below the poverty rate. So you'll see us, I think, addressing all of those. We're going to continue to look at our broadband coverage. I expect public utilities have informed us they have what they call dark fiber. And what that is parts of their internet that they utilize to run the utility grid, which you and I paid for, by the way. Parts of that is not being utilized. So they have a fiber, maybe they're using half of it. And they would like to lease that to individual companies to go out and spread broadband out in the communities. We need to do that. And one of the things that we are demanding, and I've demanded, is that every penny of that leased money goes to reduce the payment for ratepayers. So if we lease part of their dark fiber, that reduces your electricity rates. That's where we should be, and it'll give an expansion in broadband while also hopefully holding down our cost and reducing our cost for our taxpayers and our utility users. So that's very important to us. We are looking forward to a very good year. You've seen the number. I think we've had 12 or 15 hearings on everything from insurance to alcohol beverage to corrections to Medicaid. We are very active this year. We will be very active when we come back. I propose that we come in on January the 5th, adopt our flag, of course, and do whatever other things we have to do perfunctorily, and then adjourn until March the 1st, and then come back in May 28th. The House has been less receptive to that, and of course the bill has to start in the House of Representatives. It can't start in the Senate. So we will wait on them. We are being very cautious in looking at this. We are a citizen legislature. I learned from talking to you. I want to talk to you. I want my senators to go home and visit with you, and you to tell them we need to do this. We need to do this on infrastructure. We need whatever those issues are. And we're now divided until the vaccine gets here. We're not able to have groupings. We're not able to have speeches. We're not able to have groups where these members of the legislature in the House and Senate meet with people. We are a citizen legislature. Now, when we can't discuss with you, that to me shrinks the ability to have good legislation. It also, unfortunately, because we're 172, 174 of us up here, we all go to all parts of the state. So if somebody catches this COVID here, as I had it after last July, then it spreads from Pearl River to Alcorn. You know, it goes all over just because we're in contact with each other here. I don't know how that will work out. I still am very concerned about our post-Christmas COVID here. I'm very concerned that my individual citizenry don't have access to their legislators. I'm worried about my legislators going back and taking something from one part of the state to another that didn't have it before. And I'm worried about my people who work here. We have several hundred people who just work in the Capitol every day. So we'll see how that works out. If the House does not agree with that, we'll continue on and we'll complete the legislative work here. And with every possible result that Dr. Dobbs gives us, or every guideline he gives us, we'll be socially distancing and we'll be doing all the things that we need to do here. We'll just try to take the best we can to make sure that we don't become a COVID spreader and that we also have access to you as individuals. Now, we're going to have a few questions. None of these are scripted, so I have no idea what they'll be, but we'll try to answer them. So I guess we will start with whomever wants to start.
And I'll repeat the questions for everyone on Zoom, so I think we'll let people in the room go first, and then I've got 3 or 4 here online.
Just wondering about...
You need to say your name, so
Sarah.
Y'all Politics, Sarah Ulmer.
Just curious about access to the Capitol. If you do stay and from January through, or even come back mid-March, particularly for press and things like that, will it look similar to how it was done in 2020, or are y'all making new guidelines and adjustments to that?
We'll have, I think, you'll still have to be, your temperature will be taken when you come in. We have new scanning machines that will also be scanning your purses and your person and whatnot, wallets or whatever. So we'll have some of that going on. We will have encourage our members of the Senate after we have roll call to adjourn to their offices here. As many of them, not all the senators have offices, only about a half of them actually do. And then we will spread out the remaining half in the Senate chambers. I'm not sure how the House is going to have more people. I have 122. The House had a number of their committee meetings in the House chambers and dispersed from there. We're smaller, so we'll probably continue to have our hearings in various rooms and whatnot. We will be meticulous about sanitation and about masks and about making every conceivable case we can to make sure that we don't have anyone here have COVID related. I expect those will be stronger than we had when we were here last time. But also, we've got 174 people that are members of the House and the Senate that come here every day, and we'll have to make accommodations.
Governor can you just walk us through again what you're thinking right now, what you're proposing in terms of coming back just for 1 or 2 days next week, or just 1 day is what you would like, and then not until March 1st? Can you just walk us through that timeline?
Well, first of all, this is a preliminary discussion. The Speaker and I are going to meet this afternoon at 3:30, and we're continuing to look at the caseload. And it may well be next week when we get here that we find we have another spike of over 2,000 a day, which is critical in Mississippi, that we make another decision. But if we were to come back, we would come back and do the flag votes, and we would do the probably some of the advising consents that the Senate has to do. The House doesn't have to do those. But we'll do whatever perfunctory things we need to make sure that gets done. And there may be some holdovers from the CARES Act, because the new act may allow us to resurface some of that money. Whatever we needed to do, we would try to get done in that first week or 10 days. And then we would adjourn back down to March 5th. How many days it would take depends on how that workload is for the Senate and the House. And again, the Speaker and I will be discussing that today. But in that discussion, we want to be very careful that everyone understand there's no more money to members of the legislature. In fact, it's an inconvenience to them, because we would be out and then back in. We don't want to do a yo-yo thing where we call them back in every other week or something, whatever happens to spike up. So we would like to have a fixed period for sure for everyone. But it's more expensive for them because some of them have rented apartments here and that kind of thing, and they have to pay that rent longer than they would ordinarily. So there's more economic issues that are involved with that. But the overriding thing that I think the Speaker and I both agree on is we want public health, and that's the citizens first, then the people that work here, and then the members of the legislature. So I expect that to be an ongoing decision. We could see a spike after we've been here 2 weeks, and we make another turn. We just have to wait and see how it comes out.
If that timeline, if that's kind of rough, proposal does work out, it would require extending into, said, sometime
May 28th. May before Memorial Day, we would be finished. We have a June 30 year-end budget requirement. So again, I expect those to be ongoing discussions as we go along. The Speaker and I'll keep looking at the numbers. If we're blessed with the vaccine coming quicker, or we're blessed by not having a spike, we can go on and finish our business. We want to do that. If we're in the middle of an increased pandemic, then I think we would be foolish not to consider an alternative. Ms. Gerald, Channel 12.
Gerald Harris, Channel 12. The state will probably need some sort of new revenue to bounce back faster instead of a slow grind to get where you want to go. Are you prepared to do anything bold, such as eliminate gas tax or expand Medicaid to cover or to help surge the economy here once everyone gets through past this?
Yeah, we have considered a number of options, and just to be frank about that, we certainly have considered a number of options. The federal government just yesterday passed another stimulus package. I haven't even had a chance to read it yet, but that apparently is going to go on another 3 months. what was driving our discussions was the first quarter of next year, from January to March of next year. And the reason for that is, in Mississippi, we devoted over $3.1 billion to employees that were laid off between May and September. I didn't even get the October and November numbers in, but clearly we're over $3.5 billion. That infused into the economy. We're actually over budget right now, probably $250 to $270 million over budget. But we knew that we were going to come off this government expenditure at some point in time, probably the first quarter. Now the government has given some money, plus apparently there's another bill for $2,000 per person, per family, some money back, which will incentivize our collections again. People spend that money when they get it. So we may end up not having the, I would say, going off the cliff that I anticipated in January, because the federal government has bailed us out again. But eventually, Gerald, we're going to have to face the fact that we're not going to have that. Our people got to get back to work. And that's the biggest thing we can do, I think, is make sure that people who are not going back, and some of these jobs, some people say as many as 20 or 30% of them won't be available again. We need to take this time to train them technically to get back in the workforce. If that occurs and we have people working again, then we can start looking at reducing taxes and a number of other issues that you brought up right here.
Governor, while we're on this subject, Emily Waxter-Pettis had a question. What does Lieutenant Governor Hosemann think about Governor Reeves' proposal to phase out the state income tax? How would this affect the ability to pay for state government services?
Yeah, the governor has proposed phasing out the income tax, and of course, I'd like to phase out all taxes. You know, it'd be great, but that's just not realistic. To phase out the 4% when we're looking at it would be about $250 to $300 million we would have to make up somewhere. To phase out the entire income tax is about $1.9 billion to $2 billion currently. So we have about a $2 billion gap. Now, even if you phase that out over an 8-year period, it's still hundreds of millions of dollars a year that you would have to increase revenues from some other source, or we'd have to have a tremendously profitable year, so we would get more tax revenue as we would have some growth. We've not had that growth in Mississippi. It's been slow growth, and not as it was but in prior years. It's been slow growth and not some mercurial amount that would all of a sudden cover $250 million in cost. So I think what you'll see is us looking at the first quarter to decide whether or not there's money there for future tax. But when you do that, if in fact you're going to reallocate, by example, we're going to do away with the income tax and raise some other tax, when you do that, somebody else pays other than the people that were paying the first time. And that's a realistic expectation. If we're going to just shift the tax burden around, then we'll have very healthy discussions in the legislature about that, whether that's a good idea or whether there are people that are paying it who have more ability to do that or not. Just the phase out of it, to do that, we have to get through the first quarter, and we have to determine whether or not there's an income stream that will allow us to do that. And I want to be careful about this. I do have priorities. I think our teachers and some of our workers, people that are keeping people in prison and whatnot, are severely undercompensated, and the jobs are not being filled. And education is the key to Mississippi's future. So there are needs that we have in Mississippi that we cut last year. Education, unfortunately, had to be cut 1.6%. All other ones were cut 5% or more. So we emphasized to make sure we had good education, but those dollars have to be there. You expect to be able to send your child to a public education, over 400,000 of them in Mississippi, and we're not going to go through a process of eliminating the ability of people to get educated just for a talking point. So you'll see a study to look at this, but as I see it right now, it's very difficult to fill that hole, a $2 billion hole, or even a $250 million hole at the 4 and 5% level. So we'll be looking at all of it, and we'll be looking at it probably in March. Yes, ma'am.
Courtney and Jackson.
Hey, Courtney.
WLBT. So, do you have a specific number that you're hoping for with the teacher pay raise? I know last year it was $1,000. You had said this is a starting point. We'll reevaluate. Mm-hmm. Given where we stand with the budget, is there a number that you're hoping?
we want to start with what we proposed last year, and I think that'll be the proposal to come out this year. And then we just need and hope that we'll have a good first quarter and that will stick. And so once we do that, then we can start the process, I think, of looking at future compensation packages that are respectful of the work that those people do. If there's anybody whose poll numbers have risen over the last year, it's teachers. Moms and dads who have struggled with teaching math or whatever to their children, I think have a newfound appreciation for what a teacher does. Yes, sir.
Governor Kobe Nance with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. Moratorium on evictions ends this week. What are your thoughts on that? On thousands of Mississippians who might be facing evictions at the end of this week, and will the legislature be looking to do anything to protect those people?
Yeah, the question is, what about evictions that were supposed to come up this week? We took, I believe, $20 million from the CARES Act money, and we provided for individuals to be able to pay on a dollar-for-dollar basis the rent for individuals who had been lost their employment and were subject to eviction. That would have become effective on December the 30th for all of the individuals who had that problem. The way we couched that was we would pay half the rent if the landlord would forgive half the rent. And I think all the landlords would have done that. That's money in hand, and I think they would have done that. So that was preparatory to making sure that we started January 1st with no lingering debt. You know, they postponed this. They've been living there, so the landlord's going to want 6 months rent or whatever. Now, the Congress yesterday, as I understand, I'm going to look at it, has postponed the eviction again. So I expect that we'll see that postponed again. Our legislation was done last year, several months ago, in anticipation of a January 1st. That has been extended again. What I'd like to do is make sure that our funds to handle the evictions continue on to whatever time the federal government ceases doing that. And eventually that will occur. So I think our $20 million will hopefully stay in process to help people who haven't reorganized by then. We should start with a clean slate in January for most people, and then we'll have to see what we can do this year.
A couple of questions online from WLOX, Dave Elliott. Back to COVID, you've called the legislative session a possible super spreader. What precautions are you taking? I think you've answered a little bit of that. And then the second question is, are you confident that the projects submitted by the Gulf Coast Restoration Committee using BP funds will be effectively addressed during the 2021 session?
On COVID, we did talk about that, Dave. Good to see you. I miss being down in the coast a lot. Spent a lot of time there the previous 12 years when I was Secretary of State. A very special place. On COVID restrictions, as I mentioned to you, we will probably have heightened ones based on learning that Dr. Dobbs and others have given us about how to handle COVID. Again, when you come in the Capitol, you have a temperature check. You'll have whether or not you get a fever and that kind of thing. Then you'll be required to wear a mask here. Our members of the legislature will be dispersed to their offices where they can, or to the Senate floor where they're protected and whatnot. All of that just begs to me for us to postpone the session where we can get everybody in front of everybody that's been vaccinated. That being said, we had a less than satisfactory result last year on the coast business. We didn't even appropriate all the money, and further, we didn't fund the Department of Marine Resources, General Spraggins, for almost 2 months. That's unacceptable. We're not doing that again. So whatever we're going to work out to where we don't put state employees and people like Marine Resources where they can't make payroll. So to answer your question, I anticipate that we will have a more smooth process come this year, and I do not anticipate us leaving any state agency without being funded on June the 30th.
I've got another question on COVID or two. Nick Juden from the Jackson Free Press. Building on Dave's question, is there a complete understanding through contact tracing of what led to the 2020 legislative outbreak? Is the knowledge at work preventing another super spreader event?
That's the answer is, I think, yes. We've learned a lot. And one of the reasons, again, we go back to this postponement issue. One of the reasons is if in fact you had been with someone under Dr. Dobbs' order, you were supposed to go into quarantine for 14 days. Now, if that was enough of the Senate, we couldn't have a quorum. We wouldn't have enough people to vote. So when we go into this contact tracing, which I went through and which everybody else who's had COVID has gone through, you go and isolate yourself for 10 to 14 days. It was 14 days in my case. And they ask you who you were in direct contact. Now, I don't have my mask on. It's right here. And everybody that's out here asking questions is socially distanced from me. But we're going to require everybody to wear the mask, and we'll require everybody to do the things that make sense. That being said, in the heat of battle at the end of the session in June, we had a lot of budget issues, and our members of our committees were running back and forth and coming in and out of my office, and we're trying to settle on different things. And that basically let us let our guard down some, actually. And we weren't as good about it as we needed to be. And with that, the speaker and I and a number of other members had COVID, Manley Barton from the coast. So we want to make sure that we don't let our guard down again here. I think we're better educated, as most of the public is, about these things right now. And if, in fact, we do have the legislative session on a continuing basis, I intend to have everybody social distance and wearing a mask.
Mr. Governor, that is one of Emily's questions. Will legislators be required to wear masks? Many have not done this.
Well, last year, I think we had one senator that had a question about whether or not it was appropriate to require a mask. I think President Pro Tem met with that senator, and they worked out whatever the arrangement was. I'm hopeful that our senators now, having seen all of this, will voluntarily wear a mask. The rules of the Senate are adopted by a separate committee that Senator Dean Kirby actually chairs with 5 other members of the Senate. They'll set the rules of the operation of the Senate. I think you will see them encouraging the wearing of mask and the disbursement, as I've discussed with you. Whether they adopt a mandatory mask policy, I want to leave up to the members of the Senate.
Question from Jackson Jambalaya. PERS consultant recommended a 2 to 3 point hike in the employer contribution rate, either 9.6% or 20.5% from the current 17.4%. What is your reaction to that recommendation? The PERS board has not voted on it yet. This would mean an increase of at least $100 million.
For the workers' compensation?
No, for the employer contribution rate of PERS.
I have not seen that, so I can't respond to that. I haven't seen it. I know that we contribute about 17 point something percent, and the employee contributes about 9%. So that's about a 26% overhead that we have for retirement, plus Social Security, of course, which is about another 13%. So I haven't seen a report about that. I would hope that we don't have to burden either the state or the employee with any additional contributions. We're already at 26% or so hopefully we don't have to do any more than that.
I'm going to plow on through these unless you all have other questions. Okay, go ahead.
Anything in the way of mental health legislation, especially given where we stand with COVID and overseas initiatives within the state?
Yes, I want to thank the Attorney General Fitch, Lynn, and her staff. We have had meetings on several different issues that were concerning to me, but for a number of reasons, and I'll start with mental health. We have a mental health litigationist before a federal judge here, and he's ruled that we did not have sufficient coverage for reaching out to individuals and also keeping individuals in their certain locales as opposed to hospitalizing them. So I went to 2 or 3 of the different mental health centers in Greenwood, Vicksburg, and others, looking at what they were doing, how they were providing their services, and what were their services. We allocated over $4 million to handle strike force teams, basically. I think it's PAC teams, they call them. They go out when we have mental health issues to relieve some pressure from sheriffs and others that are basically picking up people that had mental health issues, not necessarily criminal, or maybe a combination of both. That was funded last year. Then in my meetings with the attorneys and Attorney General, we have a package for mental health that I believe addresses each and every issue that has been raised in the current litigation. Those discussions are ongoing as recently as last week. you will see us propose, I think, a package that will answer any and all of the issues raised in the federal litigation over mental health. First of all, it's the right thing to do. We need to take care of our citizens. Second of all, we don't need the federal government running anything when we can run it ourselves. So I'm very hopeful that this will enable us to reach a final conclusion. We have outside counsel and attorney general and all of them meeting with the Department of Justice on a pretty regular basis, actually, and I'm hoping that will rise to fruition in January. Yes, sir.
You mentioned this larger Medicaid-related bill that you're working on this session. Is some version of expansion, whether that is the hospital association's proposal, which would involve them pitching in, or another kind of custom expansion proposal, are any of those something you're considering this session? Do you expect to have conversations about those proposals at all?
I asked Senator Hobb Bryan, is head of our public health for the Senate, and I asked him to look at the things that he wanted to do this year. I know that he has had hearings on scope of practice, which involves some of this, the delivery of healthcare services. In my conversations with him, I didn't sense that he was going to bring up an expansion of healthcare this year, but I did sense that that was on his radar. So I can't tell you, I haven't talked to him in the last few weeks or month or two since he was down here last. I can't tell you what he's doing. I know his scope of practice issues were at his public hearings. I know it's on his radar to how healthcare is delivered in Mississippi. I expect I'll be talking with him in January whether that'll come up this year or next year or what his program is.
That would go through the public health.
That's correct. Public health.
And that just real quick, the hospital association plan goes back to when you were running for lieutenant governor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that something that you're still open to? Do you think that they're kind of the way that they work that out makes sense to you?
Well, they had some proposals. I discussed it with them. They claimed initially that they had to run it, and that we discussed the funding of it and whatnot. Eventually, they had come back to me sometime last year, maybe the year before, and said that maybe they didn't need to run the actual program, but they liked the income portion of it. And so there was some progress made on the structure of the hospital's program. But I want to leave that really up to Senator Bryan, and I want to leave him a clean slate. I know the Hospital Association made some progress on advancing alternatives to their initial proposal, and I think all of those are worth considering.
Luke, and you may want to talk to Senator Blackwell, because in the Medicaid tech bill, they are working on some proposals to have expanded services for some categories, like pregnant women, and that tech bill is very complicated, but that's part of it.
They are, and that's in conjunction with our FQHCs. Yes, Jeremy.
Yes, this is your second year going into being lieutenant governor. You're seeing it from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Are you able to navigate? I know you're familiar with navigate relationships here to be able to pass these legislations. Could face potential opposition in the House, and the governor has increased his power with the victory of the Supreme Court here in Mississippi. Kind of navigate the kind of next 2-3 years.
A good question. Like everyone who starts a new job, I've been here 12 years in the building as Secretary of State. I wasn't as familiar with the Senate operation. I've become to respect it a good bit more since I've gotten here. You saw, I think, bipartisan votes repeatedly in the Senate. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever. We voted together. We resolved our issues in a calm public discussion. I feel very comfortable with that. You will see my appointments to committee chairs are bipartisan. That's because we have people who are working and doing a good job. I see us as getting elected by party and governing by principle. And I think that our people are doing that. I have learned a lot about the rules of how to conduct the Senate and whatnot. It's a very important position. I don't vote unless there's a tie. The senators vote. But I've also learned how to encourage the discussions that I think are appropriate, and I've learned that some senators may agree with me on that, and others may want to do a different thing this year. That's okay. That's why we work together. Our working relationship with the House has been good. Really, Philip Gunn and I will have a meeting again this afternoon to go over priorities. What's the House priorities? What's ours? There'll be differences in those. How do we go about it? How should we measure? Which one should be a priority for Mississippi this year? Those will probably be different. But those discussions have been ongoing during the time in which we've been adjourned since October. So I feel comfortable with that. My Senate chairman, when I asked him, how are you meeting with the House? Like Medicaid, Representative Hood and Senator Blackwell are working hand in glove together. Those are good things. Our parks legislation, we had joint members and House members and Senate members there. So I think you see really a different atmosphere here. I don't know what to say that comes from, other than we all have things that we want to do for the state. Up here, there's a goodwill, I think, among people. I've learned the ropes about the rules and whatnot as adopted by the Senate chamber. And so I think we'll be more effective every year as we go along. But the key thing to me is the personal relationships that we have with the senators and us, of course, and our staff here. We have stayed up here 5 days a week till late at night with 4 or 5 lawyers and working on legislation, and every one of those senators calls our staff and go find out about this or that. We provide them that information so that we'll have better legislation. Clearly, I think our legislation is better this year, will be better next year than it's probably ever come out here. It'll be more discussed, more granularly looked at by me and our staff and others. So our drafting attorneys and others. So I think we're going to produce a better product, and I think those interpersonal relationships are strong right now. They're always subject to change, but today I think we're in really good shape. I was very proud of the legislature last year, y'all. We allocated out $1.2 billion, and we were the leader in, for example, in funding for people who are going to be kicked out of their apartments. We did that long before the United States Congress ever did it. We helped small employers that were vodka producers and made hand sanitizer. We held them and healthcare workers where they weren't liable before anybody else did. We used tourism money that was a model for other states. Our broadband legislation that we drafted here was used by a lot of other states to expand broadband in their states. Mississippi took the lead on a lot of CARES Act money, and that came from this relationship. And I thought I was well pleased with what we did.
From Adam.
I think you go ahead. She's had one as well.
Did you have one, Courtney?
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Adam from Mississippi Today. What, if anything, will be done in the 2021 session to address the severe shortage of teachers and college students preparing to become teachers in Mississippi? A recent report shows there's been a dramatic drop in graduates of educator preparation programs from 2013 to 2014 to 2017 to 2018. And there are almost no teachers coming to Mississippi from out of state.
We did two things. We changed where you had to have an ACT score of 21 or 3.0 average. We changed the law last year to allow more teachers who may not test well, but who did really well in college would be able to teach here in Mississippi. We are looking at the programs that were loan forgiveness programs for members who went into underserved areas of Mississippi. Those have been ineffective or ineffective and should not be maintained in their current status. We want to supplement those with other methods of direct payments for individuals who go into underserved areas. This loan program and us getting in the loan business was not optimum and just didn't work. So you'll see some of that where we're going to encourage individual teachers to come back. The teacher pay raise will help. We're not, even with the teacher pay raise, we're not as competitive as I hope and intend for us to be. But all of those will be better effective. Part of this that sometimes people don't want to discuss, we need parents I mean, we need you as a parent, a father or mother or aunt or uncle or whomever, to tell their teachers that they're doing a good job, to come to the PTA meeting or come to the basketball game or serve popcorn at the football game like I used to do or whatever. You need to get involved in your school system. It's not acceptable to say, I wish we had a better teacher or a better school or a better something when you're doing nothing to accomplish that or help us with that. So I'd encourage you to please be involved in your school systems as a mom and a dad or an aunt and an uncle or grandmother or whatever. Go to the games, talk to the teacher, be responsive. But this distance learning is very difficult. Make sure your child's in front of that camera when they need to be. Make sure that they don't have their 3 other siblings fighting with them, and that you have an education environment for them. So we need some help from our parents, I think, and from our caregivers on this issue as well. We'll raise our teacher salary, and we'll accommodate them more when they go into unserved areas. But I also need for us to recognize the tremendous burden that we accept for our teachers. Not long ago, they were simply teachers, and now, in many ways, they're part-time aunts, uncles, and parents, and so we need to encourage them.
Adam, the only thing I'd add is that I was on a meeting the other day with all the education deans across the state, and they called the 21 ACT or 3.0 bill, that policy that was enacted before that required a 21 ACT was the single biggest killer of education preparation programs in the state. So the fact that they changed that we did change that last year, they said that was the biggest thing we could have done. Having said that, I do know leadership is also looking at a reciprocity bill, and if you want to talk about that offline, we can do that. Jackson Jambalaya, why should a tourism agency be governed by a board instead of a governor?
It's the tourism agency will be governed by an individual appointed by the governor, so there won't be a board. I anticipate, and this has worked well in Mississippi, there'll be some advisory board of people who are in the industry to give them some guidance on a regular basis. I think that's very healthy, but no, it would be run by an executive head appointed by the governor and approved by the Mississippi Senate.
We just have a couple more. Caleb from the Daily Journal, do you believe the legislature has a role to play in ensuring the state has a robust plan for public distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine once that vaccine is more broadly available?
Yeah, Dr. Dobbs and I are just almost in constant conversation. We get a report every morning, and I'll speak with him probably a couple of times a week about the allocation. Right now, it's being driven by the federal government. And as to who gets it, I don't think they're off base in giving it to primary health providers. As we go forward, I noticed there was some litigation already about somebody claiming they were a primary health provider in New York and not being so. And so I think there are criminal charges against them. So the vaccine will be distributed under the federal guidelines. And until such time as the state has a voice in that, we can have them. But clearly, our nursing home participants, our healthcare providers, our law enforcement, all of those primary care workers need to be first up, and I'm glad that they are first up. If we get to where the state has a voice in it, I think we'll follow Dr. Dobbs' recommendation in the Department of Health.
3 more. We've got Dave Elliott from WLOX. Is the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund sufficiently funded to meet the needs of workers if the pandemic forces any kind of shutdown?
I think that it is. And what we did as part of the CARES Act, the good work the legislature did, any money that was not utilized, for example, in the small business area, we devoted $300 million for small business. Not everybody claimed it. So I think there may be as much as $100 million left over, and it basically was paid into the Unemployment Compensation Fund. In addition to that, we put in $181 million from the CARES Act money already. As I mentioned to you, we've distributed over $3 billion to Mississippians. But right now, we're getting the first reports back here this next week. I think we're in the $400 to $500 million level. We started about 700. Again, we put in hundreds of millions of dollars, and we have compensation coming in. It would be, I think, unnecessary for us to raise the rate for people to contribute, so I'm opposed to that. And I think we'll be healthy enough where we are right now at $400 million, and then we gain about $10 million a month or so when we're back on a normal function with with unemployment being 4 or 5% versus where we are today. So I don't think there'll be any changes. I think the overflow from some of our COVID care money will go into there, and I think it will be sufficiently funded where we don't need any increase, and we'll be prepared for any other eventuality that may come. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned following the guidelines about the allocation of the vaccine, but would your hope be if you're able to get the session pushed back so that the members by that point perhaps will have been able to receive the
Yes,
vaccine?
I think so. Talking to Dr. Dobbs, he thinks that we'll get through these first primary care people in January and whatnot, and they're actually giving shots now, doctors and nurses and such. And then there's a second range, I think, of people with critical illnesses and over age 65, which a lot of our members may qualify for that. And then it would be more to the general population and whatnot. So we would get in line as we're supposed to be in line for that. And yeah, clearly by March, or by the end of March, we'll have hundreds of thousands of Mississippians that are vaccinated that are not today. So, and talking with Dr. Dobbs, he thinks there's as many as 50,000 people that are walking around with COVID in Mississippi today. And none of us have a special flag or anything, so whatever, we don't know who everybody is. And that will reduce it significantly. And again, we're really at the end of this tunnel. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel on COVID with the vaccination. Don't let your guard down. Be so careful over New Year's as to what you're doing, that kind of thing, and make sure that you're, if you're out and about or at some event, that you're socially distancing, wearing your mask, doing all the things you're supposed to do, and complying with whatever the state law is at the time.
Stephen from News Mississippi. Which
I
know we've got two more, and then I think everybody else here is good. Stephen from News Mississippi. Which agenda item do you believe has the most bipartisan support heading into session?
Which items? What?
Which item has the most bipartisan support?
I think teacher pay raise does. It was unanimous the first time out of the box. First bill we passed, Senate Bill 1, was teacher pay raise. It was unanimous.
Stephen has one more. A report shows that Mississippi once again lost population in 2020. At this point, what can be done to keep people here instead of going to Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama?
And like everything else, the census got postponed. And we probably won't know where we are until probably late next year. And we have to have that because we've got to reallocate the legislature next year. We redistrict everybody. There are a lot of things that come off that. We're going to keep our same number of House members and whatnot. And we should keep about the same number of population, but there is